This episode of the Vincast is proudly supported by Sheba, Australia's first and only active all-female rideshare service getting women and children where they need to go. You can use Sheba in Melbourne, Geelong, Sydney, Brisbane, Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast, and it will be available in Perth, Darwin and Adelaide soon. On episode 129 of the Vincast, I chat with Mattia Cianca, the 2017 Sommelier of the Year, currently working at Dinner by Heston. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Vincast. My name is James Gaspbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and this is the official last episode of 2017. It's been quite a momentous year for me, both personally and professionally. Of course, most importantly, bringing my son into the world and introducing him to my work to a certain extent. If you haven't seen them yet, I have been doing some YouTube video tastings of some wines along with Ollie. So please do check out my YouTube channel, Intrepid Wino, and check out some of those videos. It has been lots of fun, but also, it's been pretty momentous for the podcast. Not only have I had some pretty amazing guests on the show, but if you weren't there or if you haven't seen it already, held the first ever live edition of the podcast, welcomed some previous guests to the podcast and my co-host, Nevena Sporovska. And we chatted about grape varieties and what the right ones might be for Australian wine. So it was really fascinating. It was a really kind of fun way to chat about stuff, incorporating wine tasting as well. And hopefully we'll be able to hold many more in 2018, and would highly recommend checking it out and would love to see some of you there. But for the last episode of the year, I thought it was great, an opportunity to chat with recently named Sommelier of the Year with Sommeliers Australia. It's actually a competition held every couple of years, and Mattia Cianca was named this year's winner, currently working at Dinner by Heston at Crown Casino here in Melbourne. Mattia and I have been friends for quite a few years, so it was great to find out more about his background. I do hope you enjoy the episode. Please stick around to the end so you can find out how to get in contact with Mattia and myself if you did enjoy it. But until then, I'll see you on the other side. Mattia, it's been, I think, a long time coming. Thank you very much for making some time, obviously at a very busy time of the year, to sit down with me and to be on the podcast. I'm very excited to finally have a working sommelier as a guest. It's been a long time, I think something like 70 episodes. So I'm very honoured to have the recently named number one, Australian Sommelier of the Year. Thank you very much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Mattia, I think the what we have done already was we did a live YouTube tasting, which was lots of fun. We looked at Australian Riesling. That was a fun exercise. But I usually start the podcast by asking my guest if they can remember what the earliest interaction they had with wine was that made them think about it in a different way, that possibly led them on a path to working in the wine industry.
Well, I obviously always been exposed to food and restaurants, as I started working in restaurants when I was 14. But my first, let's say, serious approach to wine was in 2011, whilst I was working at a restaurant in Perth.
So you, correct me if I'm wrong, you're from Rome originally?
Yes.
And grew up there, and had the culture of cuisine, food and wine and sharing, but you didn't kind of discover wine until you were actually working in Australia.
Correct. So what I didn't know anything about wine when I was in Italy, and my father used to drink red wine out of the fridge in a plastic glass mixed with sparkling water. So that was my memory and my educational.
Better sparkling water than Coke, like they do in Spain, in Calimocho.
So yeah, I started working in this restaurant, and when eventually I got sponsored, and that was my kind of chance to stay in Australia through that restaurant, and they had a very kind of important 400 references Italian focused wine list, and being Italian, having a look at that list, and I felt like I know nothing about those wines, and I felt like, okay, if I want to work here and I want to work properly, I need to be studying. I want to know more my own country and all these varieties that they're so new to me. So everything started for that reason.
So it was a need that you needed to know more about wine because of work.
I needed to, and obviously, you know, when you work somewhere, you want to kind of do it right. You want to do it better. You want to always improve yourself. And I didn't know how it's gonna be learning about wine. I usually don't like. I never liked reading in general, and obviously reading in a second language.
You're not a studious person?
No, I wasn't. And
But you discovered a love of study, clearly.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I just enrolled in a wine course, and I fell in love with it. And the more I kind of studied and discovered more, and the more there was the need to know more, if that makes sense. So that's how everything started.
But before that, you had worked in hospitality for many years?
Correct.
How did you get started in hospitality back in Italy? You just needed a job?
Yeah, I mean, when I did, so in Italy you do primary school, and then you do 5 years, and then 3 years of secondary school, and then you need to choose which direction
What
you're going to.
Yep.
So the high school is 5 years, and you can choose hospitality. In Italy, I think most of European countries are like this. So it's kind of a compulsory school, but you can do hospitality as a high school.
So you study and work. Is that generally the idea?
I mean,
or do you study for a certain amount of time and then you start working?
You still do 5 years of compulsory school until you are 18, 19.
Okay.
And then you finish your diploma, and then you can go to university if you like. But obviously having, it's more of a professional, like vocational school. So you have 3 months summer break, and then during this break, so during the weekend, you can go and work if you like. And yeah, I just felt like, you know, I don't want to ask money to my parents, and my parents always had kind of been divorced since I was 3, so I felt like I don't want to ask money to mom because she doesn't have money. I didn't want to ask money to my father because I don't have that much confidence. So I might just go to work and get some money by myself and don't ask anything. That's how everything started. Obviously, being in hospitality school, everything was a little bit easier.
Did you kind of think of hospitality as a career path, or was it just something that you could see yourself doing? It's like, oh yeah, I could do this for now. Maybe I'll change my career path in the future. But for now, hospitality makes sense. There are plenty of jobs available, or is this kind of like you just found yourself in that situation?
I always since I was a kid, I always wanted to be a pastry chef.
Really?
Yeah. So every kind of a celebration or birthday in the family, I always trying to make cakes.
Was there someone in your family that was like particularly skilled at making pastries that kind of gave you that idea?
No.
No, you just like pastries?
Yeah, I just liked it. I don't know why. My mom used to be a photographer, and my father used to be delivery driver. So
Okay.
it's not really connection to food
Interesting
and wine.
combination, yeah.
I just obviously I like eating, and I felt it was right for me. I don't know, this kind of a big hats, chubby pastry chefs. You know, they look good. I don't know. They
always seem happy, don't they?
Yeah. So
that's why you sort of followed the hospitality path. So you studied about how to cook and that kind of thing?
So yeah, hospitality school I did 5 years, and when you do the first 2 years, you study a bit of everything, and then the third year you need to choose. And I went for cooking because I thought, anyone can be a waiter. I don't think you need to study in order to be a waiter. So I'd rather learn how to cook.
Looking back now, do you still feel that way?
No way. Obviously, I didn't know what I was talking about. I was only 15.
Sure.
And yes,
Okay.
but I did cook in a school, and I work in kitchens as well.
Yeah.
But then I found
But you thought that you could pick up the skills required to work in the front of house, but you couldn't just kind of walk into a kitchen and know how to cook and know how a kitchen works.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
So you studied that and you were working. How long? So you studied until 18?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then, but by this point, you were kind of working front of house.
I was always weekends and the first 2 summer season. I worked as a waiter,
Mm-hmm.
and then for 2 summer season after that, because you need to do a compulsory stage or
Yep.
period
Yep.
for the school.
Like an
So I
internship.
had to do internship. So I had to do cooking,
Mm-hmm.
and then I ended up staying for the whole season. So I was employed as a cook
Mm-hmm.
in an hotel for 2 summer season. That was fun. But then after my diploma, I got a job as a waiter in another hotel in Tuscany, and the service was very good. There was all trolley services and lots of wine service involved. And I fell in love with this elegance, with this kind of a candle and nighttime in the restaurant. There was all this kind of nice atmosphere about
Very
it.
classic,
Yeah,
sort
and I said,
of
oh, maybe I should be outside the
old world.
kitchen.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, that's where everything started about being outside of the kitchen and about being out in a restaurant, in a dining
Did you
room scenario.
did you miss the interaction with people? Did you kind of like the idea of having the opportunity to engage with the customer?
Um, well, I didn't miss it at that point, but I realized that I wanted to be there. I like to be able to interact with people, absolutely socializing, and I kind of, yeah, it's nice to see people um reactions and
Sure.
the way they interact with what comes out of the kitchen, but more in a more direct way.
Sure.
Yeah, and I
More
have plenty of
immediate.
friends as they work as chefs, and it wasn't. I was realizing that if you want to do this serious, it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Committing for being a chef, I didn't feel that was the right thing for me.
So
So yeah,
going from the kitchen to the front, was that a difficult transition?
no, it was very pleasant actually. I think because I always been working as a super casual places, but like always as a waiter
Mm-hmm.
before that. So it sounded like this is the right thing for me, and and the more I was doing this, okay, maybe I should work in a better place, and maybe I should learn maybe a little bit of English, and maybe I should do this. Never had anything to do with wine at that point, but I felt like I was doing the right thing in terms of, okay, be able to do this kind of service in the best possible way. I felt like that this is the right thing to do, and yeah, and so I tried to work in different restaurants in Italy, and then I did a very short period of time in London, tried to learn English. It didn't work very well at that time, but yeah, and then I went back to Rome for a year, and having tried working outside of Italy, I felt okay, outside of Italy, working conditions are very good. So I just want to go back for now, and then I want to leave again. And that's how I ended up in Australia after the last year in Rome.
Having spent time in the kitchen, do you think that helped you, gave you a better understanding of kind of what goes on behind the scenes to then be able to re-engage with the customer and see how they are actually interacting with not just the food but the entire dining experience? Do you think that you had the benefit that it was beneficial for you, having worked as a chef in the kitchen, to then have that front of house experience? Do you think that's potentially a good thing that people working in hospitality, particularly front of house, should have the opportunity to do? Spend a bit of time in the kitchen to then kind of take that to the front of house?
Absolutely. I think the better idea of the whole picture of a restaurant always helps, doesn't matter where you work. Obviously, my experience in the kitchen wasn't any fancy or any fine dining. It was really just normal food cooking, but just the way of understanding how a particular tool in the kitchen works, or how things are done, or how products are received, and how they processed. I think that definitely helped. Even in regards to timing, calling courses away. I think to have understanding of how the kitchen works in order to manage your time better on the floor, it's very important. So yeah, I'm definitely glad that I had that experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, what were you drinking at this point? Were you interested in alcohol at all, apart from just enjoying the fact that it's alcohol?
Um, no, I remember when my first year in Perth that I came as a let's say backpacker, and I was buying obviously food at Coles, and then with the receipt there was a Legoland next door, and you can get a discount
Okay,
to buy two get one free or
sure,
something
sure.
like that. So
Yep.
I remember I was buying South African Sauvignon Blanc with a tiger on the label for
Uh-huh.
$10, two
Uh-huh.
bottles,
Uh-huh.
and it was good.
Good enough. Did the job. But you came to Australia with the idea of gaining more experience in hospitality and also improving your English, and because you could earn a little bit more, perhaps.
Yes, I mean my first year in Australia wasn't definitely. I was 21 and I didn't have any idea that I was going to end up living here as a citizen now. So it was definitely, especially in Perth, I felt like okay, obviously hospitality is very different from Europe. The working condition, salary wise, was much better, and obviously I was trying to learn English and everything. So that was a good sort of a step for me in able to learn a single language and to be able to do, you know, your job in a different language, in a different country. I think is very important. Um, but yeah, and then I can just fell in love with the country, with
Sure.
the lifestyle and everything, and decided to stay and kind of work my way up in terms of visas and regulations
Sure,
and try
sure.
to collect all documents and things, and then yeah, ended up staying and moved to Melbourne in 2013.
Yeah. Um, so when you had the opportunity, as far as, working with wine, at what I'm assuming was a very good restaurant, if it's got, quite a big listing of Italian wines in Perth, um, did it seem a bit strange to you that you were all the way on the other side of the world learning about wines from your own country that you kind of hadn't had a lot of experience with? Was that strange for you?
It was, and I was thinking that I wish I could have done this earlier, but things happen for a reason, I believe, and it's not really a point of regretting what you haven't done. So I would just, obviously, I was still very young,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm trying to see the positive side of things, and I was okay. Now, if I commit myself, I know it's weird to studying Italian wines in Australia, coming from Italy, and having worked in Italy, but that's what I felt like doing it. And to be honest, obviously I was working in an Italian focused wine list restaurant, but the more when you study, especially outside of Italy, the more when you do a wine course, it's I think Italy is one of those countries that kind of cover very well.
Mm.
So I was doing that as a general understanding of wine around the world, but obviously doing my own research about
Sure.
Italian things
Sure.
according to what was listed in the restaurant.
Sure.
The restaurant provided a lot of trainings, a lot of sampling. So yeah, it was a between this course and the restaurant itself, it was a good combination of knowledge and kind of being exposed to wine in a more efficient way. So you're just trying to do as much as you can. When you discover something and you're very excited, so you're trying to do everything at once, which is not possible.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, everything kind of went into the right place.
Of course. With the course, did you ever find there were instances where they might have been talking about Italian wines and they said something you said, and you as an Italian person were like, that's not quite right. Or that doesn't, no, that's not what that means. Were there any like occasions where that might have happened?
Um, Pronunciation wise, absolutely, from Australian teachers. No, to be honest, I felt that the knowledge of people teaching the course was very high,
Sure,
and obviously they knew what they're talking about.
sure.
Um, being the only Italian in the room in this kind of class, sometimes I might ask, "Oh, what does this mean?" or "How do you pronounce this?" But my knowledge was literally close to zero,
Sure.
so I never had that real feeling of, "No, that's not right,"
Hmm.
because I didn't know what was right, what was wrong.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Did you think the course was very symptomatic of, or not symptomatic, but like it basically reflected what the general wine consuming public in Australia, their kind of knowledge of Italian wines? Even then, maybe like it was a lot less, but you sort of suggested that the course, it was all like a greatest hits or like a very loose kind of understanding of Italian wine and maybe only talking about certain regions, and a lot of stuff just wasn't covered. Did you find that that was sort of, when you're working in the restaurant, for example, that people were kind of completely unaware of a lot of different grape varieties from Italy, for example?
Um, well, it's a UK based course, so they the focus on France was very strong, which I fell in love with. And obviously, this couldn't be applied to the restaurant very much. I was going back to the restaurant. Oh, I know about Sancerre, I know about this, I know about that. But there was no wines from those regions on the list. So it was just um, absolutely. So the course was covering more classic regions that perhaps are more important, more relevant into the UK market. But yeah, it was, for what I needed, was lacking of information about other regions, as you said. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't know what Australian public, especially, I mean, Perth market, I would say it's really very different from Melbourne one. But I think overall, um, Australia, especially Melbourne, has an amazing view and amazing culture of food and wine. So um, I'm not sure if I'm going off topic.
But the Perth experience was different. So did you kind of enjoy the opportunity to introduce people to something different, and in terms of, particularly in terms of Italian wine?
Yeah, I think it was very important to know classic areas in order to understand what people uh, were asking for, and then in order
So
to
so if they
recommend.
if they said that they liked, Sauvignon Blanc from the Adelaide Hills, or they liked Yarra Valley Chardonnay, maybe you could think of something from Italy that may appeal to them, and suggest something like that. Well, if you like Sauvignon Blanc, maybe try some Soave, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where the knowledge of classic regions was very important to me, because people were asking about, okay, I only drink Barossa Shiraz. Okay, well, we don't have Barossa Shiraz here, so you might want to try an Amarone, or you might want to try a Primitivo, or you might want to try something from Sardinia. You might want to try this style of wine. Obviously, you needed to have the knowledge in order to recommend something
Mm-hmm.
very different that you then never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that was the thing for me that was very important at the time.
Mm-hmm. How long was the Perth experience?
I started in the restaurant in November 2011. I would say it was almost 2 years in
Mm-hmm.
that restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Overall in Perth, it was around 4 years.
Yep. And what brought you to Melbourne? You just
Um,
needed a change?
yeah, I think I was feeling that wine was the right path for me to be in, and I really wanted to do more. And obviously, uh, this course had more levels to do, and in Perth they only do up to the third level. And I wanted to do more, and the options were either Sydney or Melbourne. And yeah, I had some contacts in Melbourne. I had a kind of an interview already arranged for a possible job in Melbourne, so I decided to move to Melbourne and enroll into the last level of this course. And then eventually, yeah, just moved to Melbourne in 2013.
Mm. Sincerest apologies for interrupting another fascinating Vincast chat, but I wanted to mention the supporter of this episode of the podcast. So I'm speaking exclusively to the female listeners of the podcast who might happen to be at a wine event, a dinner, or something like that in the city, and looking at a way to get home. Why not consider the new Australian Sheba app, which has been set up by women for women. Sheba is a safe and convenient form of transportation for female only passengers, which makes you feel more comfortable because not only are all the drivers females themselves, but they also take home 85% of the revenue. So I highly recommend checking out the app and finding out if Sheba is available in your area. Get started with Sheba today. Visit the App Store or the Google Play Store to download the Sheba app and get riding in minutes. When you ride with Sheba, you're getting where you need to go and connecting with a ride sharing community full of exceptional Australian women. Download the app today. You got a position in Melbourne,
Yes,
and was that where you worked for a number of years?
correct.
So this was at Attica.
Yes.
So to go, to come to Melbourne, and it's still relatively young, and to basically work at the number one restaurant in Australia, generally considered, if you
Yeah.
if you go based on the top 50 guide.
Yeah.
Was that, and having worked at a restaurant that focused on Italian wines, and then I believe you worked at Print Hall. Did you work at Print Hall?
No.
No? I don't know why I thought you worked at Print Hall. But you worked at probably, a couple of the better places in Perth. What was it like kind of making that shift to Melbourne and then working at such an incredible and unique restaurant like Attica?
It was a big change, and I obviously didn't expect to be working there when I was still in this restaurant called Galileo in Perth.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the name of the
Galileo
restaurant in
Buona
Perth, which I
Cucina.
highly recommend.
Mhm.
I moved to Melbourne. Before I moved to Melbourne, I was kind of having a look what was available, and I only wanted to stay in hospitality if it had to be related to wine in order to me still be in a restaurant, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wanted to be more exposed to wine, and I only wanted to have a wine focused role. So I think I wasn't looking for any staff, and I was waiting for another restaurants to get back to me. So while I was waiting, I just want to check if at Attica they do any kind of a stage or any kind of a just like working for free, just having a look what happens there. I was so curious about this restaurant because it's written everywhere and it's all these awards and things, and so I'm just wondering what it's gonna be like. And obviously I read about the former restaurant manager Andrew Plain, so I read about him and I read about his kind of a story and the way it was
His
progressing
philosophies,
to the core of Master Sommeliers, which was new to me as well. So as it might be interesting to know this guy and to meet him and to eventually work with him. So I just sent him another email. I said, do you guys do any stage in front of us? And is there any chance I can come and have a look and help you? I said, yeah, we should catch up for a chat. We usually don't do stage in the front of us. We only do in the kitchen. You should come and have a chat. And that's what happened. And it was funny because he was asking me a lot of questions about myself, and then it's maybe I should introduce myself. Ben just said, and I thought that's not needed. I know everything about you already.
Sure. I've done my research.
But yeah, so you should come for a trial and see if he can give you like a position few nights. You can wash glasses and you can do this and you can have a look what we do. And as soon as I entered the restaurant, I felt the pressure of service and the standards and everything. And I said, this place is cool. This place is different. And it reminds me of the standards that they were in Europe, but with more relaxed way. And I really felt like, okay, I think this is what Australia hospitality is about.
So you felt that it captured the kind of the very classic, elegant approach that you first saw back in Tuscany, but it did it in a uniquely Australian / New Zealand way, so that it felt like it was very serious and high quality, but not this kind of very formal way.
Yeah, so people were very relaxed, but the knowledge that you had to have in order to be there, even just delivering bread at the table, you had to know everything possible that the guests might ask. And I found it challenging, discovering natural and local ingredients. There's no translation and all those things. So it took me a long time to learn the whole menu. Um, but anyway, after my first day, Ben just said, "Look, you could, we might have a position for you at the end of the month if you want."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay, that's amazing." And I'm just to be clear, I'm still waiting for this other place to reply. Um, but I said, even if it's, I don't think I can do anything with wine in this restaurant because there's so many talented people already. And I was hearing the conversation they're having. I had no idea what they're talking about. They're talking about wine, but things I never heard of. So
Yeah.
I think I need to study even more. I
Mm.
thought I knew about wine, but obviously I don't.
Mm.
So I think I'm in the right place with the right people. Even if I'm not exposed to wine, I think it's good for now. That was my feeling at the time, and then everything changed after a few months.
Was that one of the big differences with the Melbourne experience? Is that you obviously it's a much bigger city and there are a lot more diversity and people care more about dining and wine. Was it really great for you to start to meet more people and maybe find more like-minded people and to start tasting together and talking about wines and be influenced by each other?
Yeah, I mean, Melbourne is one of these cities, one of these places that the more you live, that's my personal experience. The more you live it, the more you love it. And what I love about Melbourne is definitely not the weather. It's about the connection, the community, and the people that you can meet and see and chat to on daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is so many. Um, I mean, dedicated people that I found are so approachable and so available to discuss, to meet, to taste, to study, and do all those things. So
Mm-hmm.
you can find free tastings once a week in different bottle shops and different wine stores. And I never had this. I never experienced that before, and I thought, "Oh, if you want to learn, this is the right place to be." So yeah, I definitely felt there was a change, like a real change. And
Mm-hmm.
it's okay if I commit to this. I think in Melbourne it's possible.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Australian ingredients, so to speak, Australian, flora. Um, what had been your experiences with Australian wines up to this point? Had you had lots of exposure to wines from Western Australia when you were over in Perth, and Melbourne gave you even more exposure to wines from Victoria and South Australia, New South Wales, that kind of thing?
Yeah, when I was in Perth, I was funny enough, I was exposed to more Italian wines and obviously Western Australian wines. In fact, my very first wine course was on Western Australian Wine Association something, and it was only about Western Australian wines. Moving to Melbourne was more and more about French wines and obviously Victorian wines. So, and even everything made sense because the more I was studying, the more I was studying France and French wines, and I
Sure.
started to understand that France is. I mean, this is a big statement coming from an Italian, but the more I learned and consumed French wines, the more I was in love with France.
Sure.
And yeah, and the more I was buying French wines, and my wine fridge is full of French wines.
Was it something that you found fascinating, particularly having the Attica experience, seeing this revolution, I guess, or renaissance of more classic wines and sort of low intervention and focusing more on sustainable farming and limiting how much you're influenced in wine. Was this something that you were kind of interested to see, particularly whilst you were working in Melbourne, both in terms of European wines and Australian wines?
Um, yes, I mean it was a completely different picture, and to be honest with you, I didn't have a real um, comparison to make. It's such Attica was such a unique environment with
Mm-hmm.
those obviously unique ingredients, unique menu. Some of the wine pairings were just combinations that you never imagine of, and the exposure that the restaurant has to obviously suppliers and importers, it was amazing. And the wine training, the wine education, everything was just right at the time. So what was your question?
They obviously, there's been this big movement in the last 5 years with, that's I don't like to use this word too much, but natural wines, for example.
Okay, yeah.
And was this something interesting kind of to see? Because Attica is this very small microcosm where you kind of, it seems so far ahead of what's generally talked about with wine and food. So to kind of see some of the things that you probably would have been introduced to at Attica become a lot more common in other restaurants and wine bars and shops, was this something interesting for you?
It was very interesting to see, obviously, conventional wines and how people call them now natural wine. Um, I think it was absolutely interesting, but it's not something that the more you learn about things, the more you make, I would say, make up your own mind and your own picture about things. It made sense for that restaurant to have minimum intervention wines. But I agree that there is there are wines that are made using um, minimum intervention wines that are made amazing quality, amazing level. There's super balanced wines and there's super drinkable wines at all times. And there are wines that go a little bit too far. So
And they're so specific to a certain context, like you could only enjoy them, in a certain place with certain food, that kind of thing, and they don't necessarily have as much appeal.
yes, I think there was important philosophy and message in the restaurant, and the wines were all following this philosophy, but there were still wines that had balance, quality, and they're just well-made wines, but following the philosophy of the restaurant.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's important for
Knowing the kind of clientele that would be coming to Attica, they're not necessarily going to be ready to accept, or they might never be ready to accept kind of some of the style choices for these lower intervention wines. So they still want something a little bit more comfortable for them as wine consumers.
yeah. I mean, it was definitely challenging. You get different type of clientele, and obviously being a one menu only restaurant, most of I would say 50-60% of the guests were going for the wine pairing. So once they give you that freedom of doing the wine pairings, I mean, obviously the wine pairing was already set, but um, once they give you this permission of taking them to a journey, then you have very very different reactions from different people.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes people they just absolutely love it, and sometimes no, I didn't get this.
Yeah.
So obviously the communication that had to happen in the restaurant was very important.
Mhm.
Sometimes you might have a dish match to a beer, and people will just go crazy because they love beer. And sometimes ladies, oh no, I don't like this beer. I mean, not because of ladies. I mean, it can be anyone. But I'm just saying, 45 wines or things that are kind of a little bit out of the ordinary. Um, Obviously, you have different reactions, and yeah. So
But having said that, obviously Attica, people are going there for an experience, and so that's part of the experience. So hopefully you would want them to kind of follow you on a journey if they're selecting to have that. But I guess it's probably a slightly different experience at your current place of employment, which is Dinner by Heston. Even though obviously that has a very unique approach to food, uh, and I'm sure people will kind of be wanting to have matched wines, that kind of thing. But there's so much more accessibility on the wine list as far as lots of different stuff. And so if someone comes in and they say, I specifically want to drink this wine, then you can have this. Or, I'm having this as my main. I like this kind of wine. Pick me something. Is a little bit more kind of liberating having that experience there by Heston?
yeah. So when I I was lucky enough to take this position, and it was a massive change. It's almost like having uh, the same high standard restaurant, but on the opposite
Mm.
side uh, uh, of the industry. You know, you have a la carte restaurant is much larger restaurant, up to 200 covers, even more, and you have a beautiful, crazy wine list, and it's kind of this restaurant when you think about it, and it's okay, everything is possible.
Mm.
So yeah, I think everything is possible. It's like the way I would describe that restaurant in terms of uh, wine person in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And yeah, you have access to anything really. I mean, anything that is available in Australia, you can kind of offer um, to the guest.
And working in this venue, having, a huge range of wines on offer probably gives you an opportunity to taste very extensively. Does that help you with your studies? And particularly, you recently were successful with the advanced sommelier, and you took your first stab at Master Sommelier as well. Is it great as an opportunity to taste very extensively? Also look at old wines.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're very lucky that every bottle we open, obviously, we test and we check them. It's perfect conditions. I meet a lot of suppliers and wine reps in order to select all these new products and to see what's available in Melbourne. And so yeah, definitely that helps. I think what is super important is also be working with people that drives you and kind of inspires you all time. So yeah, I mean, I always say everything happens for a reason, and I think in life, and especially in working life, timing is very important. So I made wise. I was still at Attica as a head sommelier, and believe dinner just opened, and I had this um, lunch at Dinner by Heston as a guest from Attica. It was a wine lunch, and I met Lloyd, the head sommelier at dinner, and it was just a instant connection, and we got in touch straight away. And obviously was studying for this exam, I wanted to study for this exam, and we kind of started catching up on weekly basis for testings. And
Mm.
then something became available, he offered me a job, and then I said, okay, this is
That's something.
having this sorry to interrupt, having this connection and be able to be working with people that have the same goal. I think is something very, very unique, and I'm really proud and and lucky to have this, I
Yes.
think.
And look, speaking for myself personally, I've had the opportunity of working with you when you were at Attica. And then when I remember meeting with Loic, and we very quickly kind of mentioned your name and how well you got on and that kind of thing. So when Loic, mentioned that you were coming to work at Dinner by Heston, I think my comment was the A team. Because I knew that that you would work very, very well together, because you have, a lot of uh, common ideas and philosophies and appreciation for lots and lots of different wines. Very open minded, but respecting of very classic wines, and I'm sure that everyone who's been into Dinner by Heston since you've been there has had an incredible experience. And of course, both continue on this journey with Master Sommelier, and recently you both competed in the biannual Sommelier of the Year competition, which was an amazing, like the 12 finalists, I think, from
Yes.
around Australia, and a number of our friends, our mutual friends who work as sommeliers, all extremely skilled and experienced people. So, to be named and to win the top prize, I'm sure must have been very rewarding in such a competitive field.
Yes, I don't know where to start. So again, I think everything This is such a big answer. So going back to the workplace, I think everything again happens for I mean, everything makes sense when you're surrounded by great people, and obviously, yeah, such a dedicated team. But and it's just, you work with so much talented people that they give you, they just feed you
They fuel you. Yeah.
energy and positivity.
hmm
So this is extend to the whole team, I would say. And but yeah, as you know, we just got studying every day, and I think you have a full-time job, and plus you just study full-time basically. And this competition, yeah, it's every 3 years, and they allow everyone that it's been working in Australia for at least 2 or 3 years.
hmm
And you're studying, so I think it's a good opportunity to apply and
Yeah,
to
you may,
see
may as well.
yeah. And
You're studying anyway, and yeah,
yeah,
and with advanced sommelier you're preparing for, and now master sommelier. So and you would have been tasting with a number of those finalists as well.
yeah, and it was, it was always fun, and a good opportunity to meet friends in the industry that unfortunately we don't see enough
hmm
because of our working and studying schedules. But yes, we just went back to work, and I said to like I said, we should enter this, and yeah, I think it would be a good training for just a month before the exam in London. So yeah, we did it, and we're trying to kind of push each other even more, and it's like, it would be nice to go to the final together. So obviously you have this entrance exam, which I'm not sure how many people around Australia entered. I think we'd be around 15 in Melbourne
hmm
that we did the entrance exam, and it's just a written test with with one blind wine. It was this time, and then yeah, they just collect the scores and um, nominate the top 12 scores in the country, and then that's where the semi-final starts. And then you do another written theory, written test, blind testing, and a practical scenario again, and then they just name the three top scores out of those 12,
hmm
and then you perform this final live. So just before that, after the semifinal, we went back to work, as we have to work on that Saturday night. And at the end of service, it would be nice to be in the final together. It would be nice to to have that kind of you know friendship, working relationship, and studying kind of um, um, friendship, and studying, how do you say that, studying kind of energy linked to that competition would be very nice. And
Yeah.
then the day after, when they called both of our names, I was I don't know, I felt very special. I felt very um it was a, yeah, very very good moment actually. So yeah, it was fun. It was obviously go through a lot of pressure, a lot of stress,
A lot of
and
work.
yeah, but you have people watching you, and everyone is within the industry. So but yeah, try to stay focused and move on. So yeah, it was a very good experience.
And well deserved, obviously, for both of you to be named, two of the top three in Australia, and I think that it is testament to the passion and the hard work that you put in, and that you surround yourself with people who encourage and push you. So obviously, thank you very much, Mattia, for
You're
coming and
welcome.
sharing your story. I really do appreciate it. Do you have social media accounts you potentially would want people to follow you on, so they can get in
Uh,
touch and let you know how much they enjoyed the episode?
of course. I'm not a really social media person, but my Instagram is Mattia Mattia 0449, and my Facebook,
Twitter,
Twitter.
if anyone
I
uses
think
Twitter
Twitter
anymore.
is the same.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think Twitter is
Easy to
Mattia
find.
0449.
I will have the links as always. I'll have the links so people want to follow you.
Thank you.
But thank you very much. And look, I'm looking forward to coming into Dinner by Heston very soon.
Please do.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Vincast. I have been James Garesbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino. And of course, thank you for joining me on every episode of 2017. It's been a blast recording them. I hope you have enjoyed listening to some of the stories of fantastic wine people from around the world. Of course, I'd love for you to follow me on social media at Intrepid Wino on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can also follow the podcast on Twitter at the Vincast. Please do check out my YouTube channel, Intrepid Wino. There's lots of Let's Taste wine tasting videos. You can find out how I went with making my own wine the last couple of vintages. And also, I'd love for you to leave some comments or share some of the videos on social media as well. You can subscribe to the podcast on a number of different platforms: iTunes, Player FM, Stitcher, Podbean, iHeartRadio, hopefully soon Spotify. Subscribing means you get the new episode as soon as it becomes available, and you can have access to the full back catalogue. While you're there, I really would love for you to leave a rating and a review. Not only does it provide fantastic feedback to myself and the guests, but also it helps the podcast get out to a bigger audience. I'd love for more wine lovers just like you to have a listen to some great stories. All that information, as always, is available at intrepidwino.com, as well as different writings that I've done in the past and various ways you can get in contact with me. Look, I'm looking forward to 2018. It's going to be bigger and better, more live shows, more amazing guests, and who knows what might happen with the 2018 vintage. But guys, until next year, bye.
Earbuds, Melbourne's podcast network. earbudsnetwork.com